Hello, everyone. Welcome to Empower 2021. My name is Mihe An. I am Director of Marketing at ProServeIT. Our team put together this event for you. Hopefully, you can enjoy the content, the experience, the event throughout the day. I'm here with Brady from Next After. He will share some amazing content for you. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming. If you're on the West Coast, this is really early, so hopefully you got some coffee. But I'm going to be talking about multi-channel donor communications and some of the research that we did by actually giving to 119 different nonprofits to see what is it that nonprofits were doing. So there's a lot of data in here. I'm going to go pretty quick, so hopefully you got your pencils ready. First, I want to define multi-channel, just so we have the shared understanding and shared definition of what it is that I'm talking about. So there's a few different ways to talk about multi-channel when it comes to fundraising and communications. There's omni-channel, there's so many different channels. But on its simplest level, this is how we look at fundraising in terms of donor cohorts. So we have this group of folks that are called offline only donors. Now, they only write you checks. That's the only way that they ever give to your organization. There's a similar cohort where they're offline, but with email. So these are folks that only give offline, write you checks, but they have an email with you or they receive emails. Again, they're not giving online, but they probably receive emails. They write you checks. Then you have online only donors. These are folks that only give to you through your website. And then you have these multi-channel donors. These are folks who write an offline check and an online gift within a 12-month period, usually a calendar year, possibly a fiscal year, but within a time period of 12 months, they make 2 donations, 1 offline and 1 online. So these are the general buckets, the simplified buckets we're talking about when it comes to multi-channel. So by putting donors into those buckets, we can then do something called a cohort analysis, or we can look at where does revenue come from, or what's the average revenue per donor in each of those buckets. So in this chart here, this comes from some benchmark data that we have with our clients. You can see that offline with email, online, and multi-channel, the first thing that just kind of like smacks you in the face is that multi-channel donors are worth 3 times more than offline only or online only donors. You can see how much more kind of valuable these multi-channel donors are. So the thing to keep in mind is multi-channel donors are more valuable than single channel, but it's not just about giving within the year. If we look at donor retention, the likelihood that someone gives year over year, this is a critical metric and stat that leads to something called lifetime value. How much someone gives, how much they give year over year, that means how much they give in their lifetime. And that's the critical metric that we're trying to optimize for to have sustainable fundraising. And you can see here, those multi-channel donors are 24 points more likely than offline only and 31 percentage points more likely than online donors to be retained year over year. So it's about more in a year, but also more year over year, right? Multi-channels give more likely to give year over year. It's really, really critical. But it's not just about how people choose to give, right? We're looking at their last transaction. But one of the things that we always say is where people interact isn't always where they transact. And these channels influence one another, right? So one of the ways that we can see that in this data is by looking at this offline with email crew. You can see that these folks who only give 84% more than those who write you checks and do not receive email. So again, if you're only looking at where do we get revenue, this type of in a metric wouldn't necessarily show up because they're not giving online. So you might say, oh, online has no value. No, that's not true. Online has huge value in driving this person, this offline donor with email, to give more and give more frequently. And again, we see the same type of thing when they actually go for donor retention. Offline with valid email has an increase in donor retention as well. But it's not just about mail or email. That's what we're really talking about. But we know there's other channels like the phone, right? Penelope Burke has done some great research in her donor-centered fundraising. And one of the famous experiments that I and others like to cite is she did this one test where the organization phoned their donors within 48 hours from a board member just to say thank you. And then they looked at the impact of those who received the thank you call versus those that didn't. And what they found is those who just received that phone call, that time period from a senior person, a board member, just saying thanks, gave 39% more later on than those who did not receive a thank you call. So donors who give and or receive multi-channel communication give more, and they're more likely to give year over year. I'm kind of building the case for multi-channel. So then the question you should be asking is like, well, where do these like wonderful high value donors come from? And that's the question that we ask ourselves. And so when we go back into the data and find these high value donors, where do they first come in, or where do they come from? We find that more often than not, they actually start as an online donor and then become an offline donor, as opposed to the other way around. So you can see here, small ministry, large ministry, media network, broadcast, higher ed. You can see the huge difference between offline only conversion to online versus online only conversion to offline, or who becomes a multi-channel donor. In fact, when you sum it all up, the online acquired donors are 463% to 14,400% more likely to become a multi-channel donor compared to offline acquired. So here's this kind of summary statement. Online acquired donors who give and or receive multi-channel communication give more and are more likely to give year over year. All right. So that's kind of like some of the data and some of the value behind multi-channel donors. And that's really one of the reasons why we wanted to do this research study, of saying, man, if these donors are so valuable and there's a better chance that they come in online, which is really where we focus, then what the heck are nonprofits actually doing to try and, secure multi-channel gifts, or take online to offline and vice versa? So one of the things that we do at the Next After Institute, which is where I kind of head up, is we do these research studies like this one, where we partnered with Virtuous, and we actually went out and made $20 donations, both online and offline, to the exact same 119 organizations on the exact same day. It's actually kind of tricky to figure out exactly how to do that. And we made the offline donor with an offline persona, different email, different name, different mailing address, different phone number, and tracked them separately. And the online donor, same thing, all separate, unique information, so we could track both donors, both experiences, totally separate, but at the exact same time to the exact same organization. In the end, we were able to successfully give online and offline to 102 organizations. So for a few reasons, we couldn't give offline or not online. So when you see stats or percentages, it's out of this 102 number. This is our success cohort that we really dive deeper on. So as we went about it, we actually captured different data points on the giving process while we gave, the thank you page, and we actually navigated to their ways to give page to see how are they kind of talking about different ways that a donor could give on their website. I don't have nearly enough time to go into those types of data points, but it's in the study. And then we tracked 2,297 messages across email, phone, mail, and text for 4 months. Not only did we do that, we went and we classified each communication as, was it a solicitation, where the main purpose of the communication was to ask us for money, or was it cultivation, anything else, newsletters, blog posts, etc. Then we kind of like stitched the data all back together to do this analysis, and we actually did a deeper dive on 47 direct mail appeals and 64 email appeals. Again, not talking about that so much today, but you can find that in the report. So that's what kind of went into this research study, and I want to share just a few of the key things that we learned along the way. So this question, how are organizations taking a multi-channel approach? Again, we have the online donor and the offline donor. For the online donor, we found that about 55% of organizations sent at least one email and one piece of mail to our online donor. So we say, 55% of organizations at the very, very basic level practice multi-channel to an online donor. When it looks on the offline side, that number goes all the way down to 7%. Only 7% of organizations sent at least one email and one piece of mail to our offline donor. So that was one of the first pretty shocking bits of information that we found. And then it goes on when we actually look at, well, who just emailed an offline donor? Again, remember that cohort of offline with email, how much more valuable they were? You know how kind of cheap emails are? Only 16, 17% of organizations sent our offline donor at least one email in 4 months. So kind of double shocking. And it kind of gets worse. 2 out of 10 organizations sent our offline donor nothing at all in any channel of any type in 4 months. Complete radio silence. 20% of organizations in our study. I should mention, these are pretty significant organizations. Median revenues around $50, $60 million. These aren't, really small, tiny, cash-strapped organizations necessarily. So 20% sent us absolutely nothing in 4 months. So now we're triple shocked. And in the end, we found that there was only 3% of organizations that sent online and offline messages to the online donor and online and offline messages to the offline donor. So 3% of organizations at the very basic level practiced multi-channel communications to the online and the offline donor over this 4-month time period. Only 3%, in spite of all those kind of like value factors and all that data I shared with you earlier. So this led to our very first key finding, which again, you don't need to be a data scientist to figure this one out, but very few organizations, it appears, are communicating to their smaller online and offline donors in multiple channels. That's a pretty clear key finding number one. And then if we dive a little bit deeper, key finding number two, you kind of already saw this, but the offline donor is getting lost. So again, we saw 20% of organizations send us nothing, only 17% of organizations send at least one email. And if we actually pull it back further and look at the kind of overall metrics in terms of average number of communications to each donor and the cultivation ratio, you can see that the offline donor, if they receive communication at all, receive 5 times less communication on average than the online donor. Even though this ratio of how many cultivation touch points to solicitation touch points was pretty similar, 1.7 to 1.9. So it's not like it was a fundamentally different, type of approach. It was just hugely different amount of volume. And in aggregate, it is actually 10 times less communication, primarily all driven by email communication. So even if the offline donor was getting some email communication, they received much, 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 much less compared to the online donor. So one of the things that we look at in these studies too is like, who's doing this well, or what are they doing that's interesting or unique that we can learn from? And so one of the kind of case studies that we saw in terms of who practiced a multi-channel communication plan to an offline donor was this organization called Buckner International. And so this is what their communication via email and mail looked like over this time period. And in the end, they sent 39 emails to the offline donor. So, quite a few emails. The average was 11, so they were a lot higher than average. They mailed their donor 5 times. The average was 3 in this 4-month time period. But this is where this ratio, cultivation to solicitation, is so important, where yes, they sent a lot of emails, but they sent 4.5 cultivation-focused emails, something that wasn't intended to ask you for money, for every time that they did ask you for money. And what we've seen is that the more kind of cultivation-only content you send, you generally see a bigger response in all channels. So they've clearly kind of understood this and are doing more cultivation. So that's kind of like what their communications look like. But I want to show this first kind of like 50-day type period here where they actually had like an offline donor welcome series. So a welcome series is something that's great, and we primarily use it on the online side for new subscribers and new donors. It's something that you can kind of invest in, set it up, run it, and it makes sure that donors get a good first experience after a donation or an email sign up. But they'd actually created this for the offline donor. So here's what it looked like. 3 weeks after we sent in our check, we received the thank you and receipt. They've promised us that they're going to work harder to cut down that time frame so that they can actually send it out earlier. And so in this thank you, it's very simple, but you can see they actually have a reply on the thank you itself, basically asking for another gift. Now that may be counterintuitive. We've seen this work on the online side where you ask for an additional donation immediately after a gift, as someone has kind of experienced the benefit, the warm glow, they're feeling good, they're engaged, they're on your site. And this is a similar type of tactic in the offline world. I know many people, especially in kind of the gospel mission, rescue mission space, use this type of strategy, and they do that on their thank you. So 2 weeks after we received the thank you, then we got a thank you postcard. So this was personally written, or at least it appeared to be personally written. It could have been just a nice, fancy machine. And it's from a donor relations person. And on the front, it has a little message about Buckner and what they're doing. You can see that kind of handwriting or fake handwriting. I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter because it felt personal. So that's the benefit. And then that same week, we received a second postcard. This one was had some personalization on the front. You can see Paul, which was our donor name. Paul, your gift made this possible. So some cool kind of data mail merge to get us a personalized postcard. And then they had a little story with a QR code that we could scan and actually then go online to read more of that person's story. All right, then a week after that, we received another impact postcard. This time it was a similar approach, not personalized on the front. And they had another story that we could scan a QR code and go online to engage. So they're kind of trying to get you to go from offline with a postcard to online on your mobile device. And then 2 weeks after that, then we actually had an appeal letter. And now this was a pretty broad, general, short appeal letter. You can see it there. Wasn't overly long, overly specific. It was kind of a broad ask. And then they also had a QR code that you could scan and go to a mobile optimized donation page. And another kind of interesting thing, because we're always looking at, what organizations doing, you can see here on the reply device for their appeal letter, they did not have a suggested gift amount. So normally it's like, give 25, 50, 100. They just left it open. And we've seen that work on the online side. If you have a really committed donor base or a higher than average gift, instead of trying to guess and suggest, you just step back and leave it blank letter as well. So on the offline donor side, this is what it kind of looked like. Thank you postcard, impact postcard, appeal letter. And all of that is happening while they're also sending emails, right? This is about multi-channel communication. So they sent 5 emails here, they sent 2 emails here, and they sent another 5 emails in between here. And this all happened over 52 days between when we gave and the end of that, and when we received that appeal letter. And the first 17 days, it was how long it took them to kind of get out the thank you receipt. So all this communication actually happened in 35 days. And the first time we were actually asked came in an online appeal in an email on day 33. So this is something that they've actually kind of tested and piloted, and they're finding different ways to tweak. But you can see how they're using postcards primarily to engage an offline donor while they're getting emails before they get an appeal. So I thought it was kind of a cool strategy. And when we talk about, the communications, remember, it's not just about asking. So it's really important to find, when did they ask? How do you ask? How do you optimize the ask? Definitely key. But remember, I mentioned how we've seen cultivation kind of grow giving. Well, here's the experiment that proves it. Always cite your data, always cite your work. This organization actually said, hey, we think we can grow revenue by just sending more emails that are more engaging. They were asking a lot versus sending cultivation. So over a 3-month time period, they sent 1 more email every week, just from a community manager, just saying, hey, here's a blog post you might be interested in. At the end of the 3 months, they saw an 80% increase in engagement, so opens and clicks, more emails, more engagement, maybe counterintuitive. They saw an 8.1% increase in donors and a 21% increase in revenue by not asking. All they did was send more email communication that was engaging and pointing to a resource that they thought the person would value. It's pretty mind-blowing if you sit back. We always think about, well, we don't want to ask too much. Great, don't ask too much. Send great cultivation content, and you should be able to raise more money if and when you do finally ask, right? So they actually continued this for another 3 months, and they saw a 42% increase in online revenue and a 54% increase in email engagement by sending more high-quality, personal, value-oriented, non-ask email communication. So that's kind of like key finding 2, the lost offline donor. Key finding number 3, again, we've kind of alluded to this, but online donors are more likely to get multi-channel communications, but we found it's still very email heavy. So again, 55% versus, 7%. And then, the number that received email only was 40%. So single channel was 40% for online, and offline it was 81% single channel. So there's less single channel, more multi-channel. That's good. But when we look at where do these communications actually come from, the vast majority of it is email. When we look at how much mail did the online donor receive, it was actually pretty small, an average of 3.3 overall. And what we found is 6 out of 10 organizations sent only 1 communication to the offline donor, often a thank you receipt or maybe a welcome package. So again, that's good, that's not bad, but it indicates that, again, even if someone did send mail, the idea of them doing that kind of postcard kind of welcome series or an ongoing communication offline, at least in the 4-month time period we were tracking, seemed very, very little. And again, the more likely donor to become a multi-channel donor, which is high value, is the online one. But how are they supposed to engage and possibly give offline if they're never being communicated to? So that's a big opportunity, we think, is to figure out how can we engage online donors through offline channels to see how we can boost engagement there. And then key finding number 4, you might be asking well, where the heck is the phone? I thought you said you tracked the phone. Well, we did, but just very few organizations were using it. So it was pretty hard to actually have more of an insight other than very few organizations are using it. So again, if you look at the number of organizations here that communicated via phone, via text or voicemail to the online and the offline donor, you can see it's less than 10. It's 8 and 6, and only 1 organization sent us a text. So we did receive about 18 additional phone calls, but they didn't leave us a voicemail, so we don't know exactly who that was. But even if those were 18 unique organizations, which it probably wasn't, we're still talking about a small percentage of organizations that called us at all in the 4 months that we were tracking communication, right? It's a pretty low number. And again, this is in spite of some of that data and evidence like Penelope Burke's research about a call shortly after our donation improving downstream revenue. And what's interesting is like 24% of organizations had no way for us to give us their phone online. So we intentionally gave our phone even when it wasn't required. And then when we wrote the check, we said, here's our phone number, here's our email, please contact us. We tried. 15% of organizations required us to give us their phone number, absolutely required us before we could even make an online gift, something that we've seen can actually decrease the likelihood of someone giving. They required us to give us the phone, but then they didn't do anything with it, at least not in this 4-month time period. 76% of organizations online and 100% of those that we gave offline had our phone number with our permission, our volition to call us. And very, very few organizations did. And not just that, but what did they say? Because we actually had a small amount, we could actually kind of just look at all of them and say, here's what they said. And so Kevin, who was one of the researchers on the project, looked at all the voicemails for the offline or the postal donor. Not one said thank you. Not one. These were all calls talking about like, hey, how did you want to designate your gift? They were more administrative in nature, which is kind of weird. Why are you asking us to designate a gift? But even so, how are we not saying thank you to our donors? To me, this is a cultural problem. We can talk about, you know, donors are the heroes and we should value donors. This is partly why we do these mystery donor studies, to say that's all well and good to say that stuff. How do we actually treat donors in aggregate in the real world? And the fact that we aren't even saying thanks when we call a donor who just made a gift is crazy. So this is a cultural problem. Our training, our beliefs about donor retention, all the way through the organization. Anyone who uses a phone or touches a donor should know how valuable it is to say thanks. They should be able to understand and communicate the mission of the organization. This is a key problem. So I'll kind of get off my high horse here for a second, but that was pretty shocking and frustrating to actually experience that, because this again goes kind of deeper into things, not just tactics, but kind of culture. You know, compare that experience, not being thanked, just about to give designation, versus something like this. Yes, good morning, Kevin. My name is Mario. I'm with Hope for the Warriors, and I just saw you recently donated to Hope for the very first time. Just wanted to give you a quick call and say thank you. We really appreciate your support. We just want to welcome you to our family. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at phone number. Thanks again, and have a great day. Simple, easy, right? Nothing too crazy, makes you feel good. Just a voicemail, listen to it. Wow, that organization cares. It's such a simple thing. So when we look at like who's doing it or who's actually using the phone, again, there's not a lot of organizations that can do that or that are doing that. But one organization that sent us a text was Doctors Without Borders. And so I kind of wanted to show how they were using text, because I thought it was interesting. So again, they're the only one who sent us a text message, large organization, you know, high volume. They sent us these 7-8 text messages over the course of 4 months. 3 of them were asks, one for a monthly gift, one for COVID relief, and one for a Refugee Day campaign in here. And the very first one was immediately after we gave. So they have some kind of automated systems for if phone number, send text to say thanks, which was kind of cool. But I want to look at this World Refugee Day campaign where they sent these 3 ask emails as well as this ask text on the day. So, you know, giving days, Giving Tuesday now, Giving Tuesday, North Texas Giving Day. There's all these types of giving days. December 31st is actually kind of a giving day. So here's a strategy that they use and that we often see is, one, an email in the morning, 8 a.m., longer form email, really kind of walking through why a gift is needed, strong ask to donate, and they have that kind of donate now block of text with the donate now button. 2 hours after that, we received this text message, which also asked us to give. 3 hours after that, or 5 hours between the emails, we saw this email number 2. They used a kind of animated GIF countdown clock, something that we've seen actually help improve response rate in emails for time-sensitive campaigns. And you can see the copy gets a little shorter, and then they have that donate block again. And then 5 hours after that, here's the last email that they sent, just kind of an update, midnight's the goal. Then they have a very short text, and you can see donate now, donate now. So the urgency ramps up as they get closer to the end of the campaign. So that's kind of what their kind of World Refugee Day campaign looked like, you know, is ask, ask, ask. But what's interesting is if you've ever looked at giving days, you know, a huge part of the value isn't what you do so much on the day, although that's key. It's what are you doing before the day. So if we look at all the communications we received leading up to this time period that had the 3 asks and the text, all of these emails are cultivation emails. And it's all talking about world refugees, right? There's a quiz in there that you can take. There's an immersive experience. There's talking about refugees being far from home. There was like a webinar that you could attend where they talked about the crisis and how it's affecting refugees. They're all kind of educating and creating, stating the problem. They're not asking, they're just kind of letting you know, here's what's going on. Because they know when World Refugee Day comes, they're gonna ask you 3 times, or if you gave, then they would pull you out. And they had a text in there as well to take this quiz. So they're using text in their cultivation, text on their campaign as well. They actually didn't meet their goal, so they had a follow-up, hey, would you please give? We didn't meet our goal. And then 2 days after that email, they had a, thank you so much. Here's how the campaign ended. So they kind of closed the loop on the campaign. So it's kind of interesting there. But the key finding here was the lacking phone strategy. So again, very few organizations are doing multi-channel overall, online or offline. The offline donor in particular is getting lost. Online donors are getting more multi-channel communications, but remains an opportunity, and very few organizations were using the phone, whether they were leaving voicemails or sending us text. So those are kind of the key findings, and hopefully you have a couple like little ideas, or your brain's moving and you find some things, but just in case you don't, here's a few things that we think you could do. So on the basic side, kind of simple, like can you try emailing your offline donors and mailing your online donors? It could just be one of those impact postcards after they make a donation or before an upcoming campaign. So don't be afraid to ask in these different channels, but remember, there's huge power and value in cultivation. And can you maybe have an online and or offline welcome series, something that's kind of set up, a little bit more automated, so it takes less time after it's kind of built and set up. Can you call new and online and offline donors 48 hours after donation, maybe send them a text? Think about how to thank or use this touch point sooner after their donation. Calling me 6 months after I gave isn't as powerful as calling me within 2 days after which I just gave. On direct mail reply devices, only about a quarter of organizations ask for an email, so make sure you try to capture emails wherever you can. And then if you do ask via email or direct mail, make sure you point to a very specific dedicated landing page, so there's that congruency. Here's what I said in the appeal. You go online, oh, I see, here's what they said, I'm in the right place. And then some more advanced ones, and we have more of these in our research library and then some of our courses and training, but sending text messages in the campaign, it's a lot easier to do now. There's tools like Virtuous that can automate that and incorporate that into your CRM. Send a postcard 2 to 3 weeks before an online campaign. We have an experiment where that increased online giving 200%. There's a way to automate voicemails. There's this tool called Sly Broadcast that we use both at Next After and with a lot of our clients, where you can pre-record a voicemail, hook it up to a CRM or Zapier or some kind of integration, and it'll just trigger automatically. So if someone gives a $50 donation, goes into CRM says, hey, you should send this person the voicemail, gives them a half ring, and it leaves this more personalized voicemail with a real phone number that they can call back. Pretty cost effective, automated, set it up, let it run. This is a little bit more advanced, but showing Facebook ads to direct mail donors that don't ask for money 2 to 3 weeks before they get an appeal, 2 to 3 weeks after. We've seen that increased direct mail giving anywhere from 25 to 50% at different times. And then just sending an email a couple weeks before they're going to get a direct mail appeal, 10 days after, and then after the campaign. It's kind of this straddle technique of how do you use email and direct mail. So again, we have some more different kind of trainings and resources if you want to dive deeper in this area and are trying to like, how do I do some of this stuff or what's most important? One, you can download the full study. Again, I just like scratched the surface, but it's a free report thanks to Virtuous, multichannelnonprofit.com. Go there, you get all the data, all the examples, things like that. Breaking down thank you pages, ways to give pages, direct mail solicitations, email solicitations. You can find that stuff there. And then you can find all of our other research. So our mission is to decode what works in fundraising and make it accessible to as many organizations as possible. And we do that through these research studies. We're doing one right now where we're looking at global giving, 9 different countries. We did one in higher ed. We've done one public radio, recurring, Canada. We've done all these different types of mystery donor type studies. We combine that with our experiments. I've shown you some, I've referenced some. We have over 2,500 experiments now. So we combine these research to say what works and what are the gaps. And then we create these like ebooks and trainings and templates and podcasts, and then online on-demand courses, live workshops, conferences, etc., to kind of help train and equip you and as many organizations as we can based on data, evidence, and research how we think fundraising should be done. So you can find that all at nextafter.com/institute. And if you're interested in those type of courses, we have a special code for you. You can use multi-channel to get 50% off a course or membership. And that's it. I think I made it on time. Thank you so much. If you do have questions, you can find me. I'm pretty easy to find, but it's Brady@nextafter.com, @BradyJosephson, or I'd love to connect on LinkedIn, connect with you and hear what you're up to and any questions that you might have. So that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brady. And we actually have some questions on our Q&A box. So what we're going to do is we're going to take them offline because of time constraint. We'll send them over to Brady and work with him to get back to you with some answers via email. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you so much, Brady. We'll see you again on the next event.